The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.
Willkommen. Wie geht's, Michael? How are you? Of course, that was a little bit of German just to start off the podcast. Hopefully I got that right. Mike, we're obviously joined today by Cem Kansu from Duolingo. I thought that was fantastic. You must have been enthralled because you're a super user of the app.
Yeah, it was kind of a bit of a fanboy moment for me today, just because if you listen to the episode, I'm not going to repeat it now because you'll have to hear it twice. But I am what I think you would call one of the super users of Duolingo for sure. So to be able to talk to Cem today, who is the vice president of product at Duolingo, and was obviously the driving force behind Duolingo launching its subscription product that we talked about today, Super Duolingo. Just really cool, I think, to also just kind of get some inside baseball from him. What goes into it. I think even the data insights that he was sharing were also really interesting in terms of like when people decide, to start learning a language, if there's peaks and valleys. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but I never really thought of it that obviously with it being the new year, people will make a resolution to say like, this is the year that I finally learn how to speak French so I can talk to, my grandmother, or, when I go traveling this summer, I at least have some survival French as Cem called it when he was talking to us. So,
yeah.
But yeah, you always just think I'm always fixated on like fitness goals in January, but of course there's all sorts of resolutions that people have. And I'm sure language is obviously a big one of those, right?
Free your mind, Michael, free your mind. I think, and it goes without saying that Duolingo is obviously the app that helps you learn languages. We ended up getting a bit too carried away and just started talking about baseball without mentioning what Duolingo was. But I think Cem gives a good job of setting that for us. And in fact, I think it's time to go to Cem Kansu.
We're back, and we're now very pleased to be joined by Cem Kansu, who is the vice president of product at Duolingo, where he leads the product management, user research, and product operations functions. He previously led Duolingo's monetization efforts, helped build the brand's freemium business model, and grew company revenue from $0 to more than $300 million a year. He spearheaded the development of Duolingo subscription product, Super Duolingo, which now makes up more than 75% of Duolingo's revenue. Previously, he served on Google's advertising business team. Cem holds a BS in industrial engineering from Bill Kent University, a master's in engineering and financial engineering from Cornell University, and an MBA from the Wharton School of Business. And now he is a guest on the Unlikely Innovators. Cem, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, great to be here.
It's great to have you. So I know that in your bio, we kind of talked a little bit about where you were before you joined Duolingo, and we want to spend a lot of time today on Duolingo. But before we get there, we always like to ask our guests about their career path and to find out whether or not it was an unlikely or a winding journey to get to where you are. But maybe can you talk about how your degree and your studies in industrial engineering shaped your journey to where you are now at Duolingo?
Absolutely. And I feel like a lot in generally any career path, there's always some unlikely or unwinding paths, and mine is probably not that different. So I grew up in Turkey. That's why my name is spelled with a C, but pronounced like a G. And yeah, studied industrial engineering in college, mainly because I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do, but optimizing stuff was fun and still feels that way. And industrial engineering at the end is a study of how do you optimize processes? How do you find roadblocks? Generally, I think it came out of the need for doing it for things like factories and manufacturing lines. But as it evolved, the practice kind of applies to a lot of any process you can kind of take and improve. My winding path was wanted to apply that to financial engineering, got a master's there. As I was doing soul searching, decided to join Google because technology and applying the skill set there seemed interesting. However, I think the skill set of just generally engineering and trying to take and have like a creative and analytic way to solve a problem was helpful all across. Eventually, my path to product was pretty winding, and as I went to business school, I really enjoyed being in technology, but I didn't enjoy too much of just being in business development. So product seemed like the natural fit for what seemed interesting to me. And coming out of business school, I joined Duolingo to work on product. So the story of me coming to Duolingo, I tried a bunch of stuff. It was industrial engineering, financial engineering, and then eventually business development. And I do feel like I found kind of what I was looking for, combining those skill sets in product, because you do get to solve a lot of creative problems. You have to be pretty analytical to work on a consumer product that generates a lot of data to make good database decisions, and you need a decent amount of creativity to innovate and create good products. So I think it combined the stuff I was interested in and what I kind of had learned to do. And I've now been at Duolingo for now 6 years, doing those.
That's such an it's so great to have you on, Jem, but it's such a great, it's almost as if you're inadvertently training to be in charge of the growth strategy, because you have to have that business development background, you have the financial piece, and then you've also put yourself in the sort of shoes of the customer when it comes to product. You've sort of lived the Duolingo experience from the point of view of the client, as you do when you're developing interesting products. Um, as users of apps, it's so interesting because we never think about the monetization strategy that goes behind keeping these companies and growing these companies. Can you talk about how you took the company from essentially zero revenue to $300 million a year? What was that path like? Because it's not just like flicking a switch and now you pay for a service. There's some thought going in there. How do you get into the minds of the user to do that?
Yeah, so this will be a little bit of history on Duolingo, and maybe it is worth mentioning what Duolingo is for anybody that might listen and not fully aware. So Duolingo right now is the biggest language learning platform. It is the most downloaded education app in both Google Play and the Apple Store. It's both the most downloaded and the highest grossing as well. So from a business standpoint, it's become as we talk about the monetization journey. In 2016, it was nowhere on the map for revenue, but today it's the highest grossing education app as well. And we teach more than 40 languages on Duolingo. And as of the past 2 years, we're also expanding beyond language learning as well. So we now have a math app, we have a literacy app. So we've gone beyond just language learning and now kind of applying what we learned in different subjects. The story of monetization at Duolingo, when Duolingo first launched in 2011, it actually was relying a lot on translations. So this model does not exist anymore, but it launched with the business model of everything you learn on Duolingo would be free, which is still true today. So that certainly has not changed, because our mission is to provide develop the world's best education and provide all of our content for free, because we stand for access to education. The content was fully free, and the way Duolingo was going to make money is as users did exercises to learn the language, they would certainly do some translation exercises. And if you crowdsource translations, you can actually sell translation services. So you can take an article from, let's say, CNN, chunk it up, serve it as a challenge to your user base, and as they translate it, you can crowdsource what the true translation is, and then basically automatically translate an article because you have so much users doing this type of exercises. This was the initial model. If you kind of find the old videos of Duolingo's pitch and launch, this is what kind of is talked about as the business model. It had two challenges for Duolingo. One of them was, if your revenue source is translations, you quickly turn into a translation company. And we never wanted to be one. We always wanted to be an education company. And the second one is, translation is a business that's a bit of a race to the bottom. So you, let's say, charge today $5 per hour, $5 per article, and that's what you can charge today. Very quickly, there is someone else that will do it for $3 an hour from the Philippines, and then the year after it's $2. It's a very hard business to, one, differentiate, and two, have pricing power. So it was kind of a business that we didn't see scaling very much. And long story short, around 2016, this business model didn't exist. So we were looking for how we had a growing user base, but we had no revenue. We were looking for what to do. So that's around the time I joined as well. And the things we tried was, okay, we have a big user base. Our growth is doing really well. And we don't really know what to charge for, because we want to provide all the education for free. ads was the first choice to try, because it's like, it's one way to monetize without asking anybody to pay for anything. That got us to a start. We tested where to put ads, how to make them not intrusive, and how much revenue it can generate, and what it does to user growth. That led its way to also, if you have ads, users start asking you, well, I got money, can you give me no ads instead? So it was a natural way to be like, okay, we have ads, we could have a no ads version. We never, at the time, we never thought subscriptions would be the way to go. So we actually tested in-app purchases that have no ads. So you would buy a thing that says you get no ads for 30 days. And in hindsight, it was really stupid, but even like a stupid purchase like that found some traction. So we're like, okay, there's demand here. Like some of our user base wants to do this. So naturally that turned into, okay, you could have a no ads, that's a subscription. And then we could build other features that aren't necessarily changing any of the education experience, but it changes kind of the added bells and whistles of the user experience. So at the time we launched with a feature set, our first subscription product, that is, it had no ads, so it removed ads. It gave you offline access, so you could use it without internet connection. And then we kind of added not a real feature, but we said you could support Duolingo, because a lot of people were also writing to us saying, oh, I would love to donate to you guys because I really believe in the mission of what Duolingo is doing. So we kind of added this like feel-good feature that didn't really give you a change in your experience, but we called it out as a thing you would do if you bought the subscription. It changed. This was 2016, end of 16 to 17, that transformed our business because we just saw good traction. The first experiment was mild, but the more we kind of built features into the subscription, we saw it resonated with our user base. So today, more than 80% of our business comes from our freemium subscription. The reason I use the term freemium is everything you want to learn on Duolingo, you can do for free. If you would like to upgrade to the premium, that's completely optional, but you do get these added features. But if your goal is to just learn French and you don't care about the bells and whistles, obviously all of our users get to do that for free. And that's kind of our story, pretty much. I mean, the one other thing I'll mention is we also have a kind of a game-like one-off in-app purchase business as well, that is growing. And we try to add more game-like features that if you don't want to subscribe, you can also buy one-off kind of game-style upgrades and boosters, things like that, with in-app purchases. But core, kind of the story of monetization has been growing our premium subscription.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear it on that side because as somebody like myself I've been using Duolingo for a long time now, and I think what led me to make the jump to the subscription service was that I had tried taking French as a second language course locally here at the local college at night, and it would never stick. And so like I knew what I was paying or what my company was paying to send me there. And then I knew that if I had the free version of Duolingo, I was inconsistent with it. And then I said one day, if I buy the subscription and I pay for it, I've got some skin in the game, and it's still going to be less than what I would pay if I go and do these courses that are still not helping me progress in my French. And I've probably been on it ever since. I don't know when, but or how long it's been, but yeah, that was kind of the thought process for me, is that I almost needed that extra like push to like really invest, because if I had some money on the table, then it's like, can't let it go for too many days, because you've got to make your money's worth it, right? So
that's fascinating. We do see that, which is, there's some benefit to buying the subscription. There's the features. I'm excited about them, but also I think spending money is good for me because I will have skin in the game. It's true. I think you naturally have more skin in the game as well. We see that with some of our user base, and we specifically see it around this time of year because we're in January. This is New Year's resolution time. I think a lot of people want to commit and have skin in the game for the rest of the year, so their habit doesn't fall off.
Yeah. Before because I have some other things I want to talk to you about with my own experience, but we talked about the revenue model, and obviously I think that hockey stick curve speaks for itself. But like coming in when it really has nowhere to go but up, is that almost even more daunting when you know that like you've got so many options to potentially take it, because anything you do is going to be an improvement, but like to find the right one that's going to be sustainable over time. Like, did you find that a daunting process coming in at that point, or what was your thought process behind taking on that task when you did in 2016?
It was very scary, actually. Like in hindsight, everything looks great when we look at curves that have gone up for a while. And it was scary because one, you don't know if it's nothing but up. Like it's at that point in time, you don't know. You could also monetize in the wrong way, piss off your users, and you have no business left. So I think it's hard to know exactly what will stick. So that's why we also A/B test so many things. Like we have hypotheses, but you can't be 100% sure. But I think the other reason was for Duolingo, the company went through a pretty cultural change as monetization became an important part of our product set. Meaning, if you go and dig through and find kind of the old material of Duolingo, it says things, the old promotional material things says things like, we will not have ads, we will not have in-app purchases, and we will not have subscriptions. At its launch, it was like, all right, we'll monetize differently. That was the idea. If you say that to a company for a while, even our own employees were kind of biased against these things. Like there was just internal bias and a cultural shift to be like, if these things are done well, they're not evil to what we're doing. They're actually supportive and they fund our mission. But I think like internal cultural shift was one kind of friction to go through. And the other one is, I mentioned this, but making sure we test things and find a sustainable model that doesn't hurt our user growth and alienate our user base that is like passionate, excited about having free content. And that's not changing, but they will now see things that we charge for. Like no ads is something you pay for. It was certainly daunting because there's a risk that pisses off our user base and they decide to leave our platform. So there's certainly risk there. And the third one is, it is the way we decided to monetize this kind of freemium approach is very much taking the long view on it. Probably is not the most optimal way to make the most revenue in the shortest amount of time. If you really want to do that, you probably would build the whole thing premium and charge for everything. But that's not what we want to do. We also don't believe it is the right thing to do in the long term, because I think having a amazing free experience, it's good for the world, it's good for our mission, but it's also good for business because it helps our user growth and expand the pie of who's learning languages on Duolingo. Not giving to the pressure of revenue and optimizing for the short term was the other challenge. So you always want to keep kind of like, what is good for us in the 5 to 10 year timeline or beyond, rather than what's good for us in the next year. I think that also took general convincing as well on defining our business model of freemium and kind of making it happen. So long story short, I would say it was very daunting and it was pretty scary, because if we had screwed it up, we would have no company left. So at the time, it certainly wasn't obvious.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, like I was going to ask you more about monetization, but I think you've actually hit the nail on the head for us on that. So I was gonna ask you instead, when you look at a service like yours, is the user, maybe I'll ask it this way, how many languages per user for the premium are you seeing? Because if I'm like Mike and I'm learning to learn French, for example, would that then empower me to want to then use Spanish? What are you seeing with regard to that kind of behavioral? I know you probably keep excellent data analytics on the behavior of your users, as any good tech company does. But is there any interesting insights you could share there?
Yeah, we certainly see a good percentage of our users learn multiple languages at once. And the journey differs by user. There's no standard path. But generally, meaning some users come in and they're like, I want to learn 3 languages at once. I know Duolingo has all 3. I'm just going to go out of the gate. But it's more likely that your use case for learning a language shifts over time. Today, let's say in 6 months, you're going to Spain. You want to practice Spanish because you want to order your coffee in Spanish. That's why you came to Duolingo. Great. You start with Spanish and you really like Duolingo. A year passes. You're like, well, I had actually learned some French in high school. Let me also pick that up. Or I don't know, my interest in Spanish slowed down. Let me continue with French. So we see a lot of switches. There's no obvious pattern, but a good chunk of our daily users learn more than one language. There's not a ton of difference between if you are a subscriber versus if you're not a subscriber on how much languages are being learned. I don't think there's like an obvious pattern, but a good percentage of our users are interested in learning more than one language. And there's this is probably a distribution, but like probably a small percentage, but there are people that are learning more than 5, 10 languages all at once. Like there are people that spend hours a day on Duolingo just because they're passionate about languages. So it's certainly a distribution. Most of our users, though, majority of our users are at a given time learning one language, but over their lifetime, a lot of users try different languages.
Mm-hmm. I'm like I mentioned earlier, I'm on French right now. Like I said, it didn't work when I was trying back in the day, but then I had kids, and we decided that we wanted our girls to speak French as their first language. So I had no choice but to learn French. So I'm in an immersive environment where at home we speak French to our daughters, and then at work I speak English. My wife and I speak English to each other, but like at home it's exclusively French for the most part. But I find myself where I'll incorporate words when I'm talking to my daughters that I know they haven't taught me. I've picked them up from Duolingo because I do my exercises every day because I want to keep that hot streak going. I don't want it to go away. So I'm on it every day. And I always think about, I am learning because I'm incorporating speech patterns and different words that I haven't used before into my conversations, and we're all learning kind of together. But I'm assuming that experience that I'm sharing with you right now, I'm sure you guys have heard tons of stories from users over the years, but are there any that you've heard that really stick out to you in terms of like how Duolingo has helped somebody, and maybe by taking, being on Duolingo, it's helped them achieve something that they otherwise thought would have been off limits, but by learning a new language, they've been able to accomplish X, Y, or Z, or meet somebody that's, changed their life?
There's a lot of these stories. A few common ones that are always impressive, or just honestly heartwarming to hear, is someone that is learning a language to be able to speak to their grandparents or like some family members, because they just have this language barrier, and Duolingo helps them close that barrier, so they're able to connect because of it. Another one that we have people that have kind of like basically been able to either meet their spouse or connect with their spouse because of Duolingo. They live in a foreign country. They didn't know the language, but learning a little bit of it helped them date and eventually kind of connect with their partner. Those stories we always love hearing about. But for me personally, so I'm from Turkey. That's where I grew up, and we this was, I think, 4 years ago now. We shot a documentary about Syrian refugees that are going through Syrian refugees focused on their language journey, because it's obviously a heartbreaking story to kind of observe what a refugee goes through when they kind of leave their home country. But language plays a pretty important part. The moment you kind of have to exist somewhere that you don't know the language of. We shot a documentary that included Turkey, Jordan, and I was part of kind of helping the documentary crew and talk to our users. So it was heartwarming, eye-opening, and a little bit of life-changing for me to talk to Syrian refugees that now live in Turkey, and they use Duolingo, and they use it mainly because they have basically no money, and there is not a lot of tools for free that you can use to learn a language. And they're using Duolingo to learn Turkish, to find jobs in Turkey, to integrate into society. And it made the work we do very meaningful. So I'm always amazed by refugee stories where Duolingo helps them actually integrate into their new countries.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get a better triple bottom line than that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I'm not going to bring up competitors of yours, but I have to in order to get a weigh in on this, Cem.
Sure.
When my wife and I started dating, so my wife comes from a Finnish family. They're from Finland. Her first language is Finn. Finn is a notoriously hard language to learn. There are not too many other languages like it. Um, she used to boast that Rosetta Stone didn't have a Finnish option or a Finnish module because it's so hard. But I know that Finn is part of the Duolingo family of languages. And I wanted to ask you if there are any languages that have eluded Duolingo because of difficulty, and if you could share any interesting stories or thoughts about that.
The I think difficulty of a language is rarely a reason for us to shy away from introducing to Duolingo. So today we have more than 40 languages that are being taught, and more than 90 courses. When I say course, because there's also the language and the language you're learning. So English to Spanish and Spanish to English are two different courses. That's how we define a course. But anyway, there's more than 40 languages and more than 90 courses today. And our language set includes like all the kind of the widely spoken languages like Spanish, English, French, and two endangered ones like Navajo or Irish or Yiddish. So it's a wide range. We even have fictional languages actually, like Klingon from Star Trek or High Valyrian from Game of Thrones. So it's certainly a wide range. We for us, adding a language generally is a resourcing decision. Obviously we want to help endangered languages be on Duolingo. We also obviously want to cover as much as possible all the widely spoken languages, but it is a lot of work to add a language course at the quality bar we want all of our courses to be. And today total, there's more than 7,000 languages in the world, and we have 40. So our goal isn't to obviously add every language we can. I mean, we would love to do it, but it's you got to prioritize resources. We're spending a ton of time improving the courses we have, because adding a course is one piece of the equation. I think how much you can teach in a language is also, for us, it's an evergreen journey. So our work in teaching Spanish, English, French is never done. It's actually always growing. Because we want to inch everyone that's learning a language closer to fluency. So that's our take on kind of like what languages to add and what to prioritize. Today, majority of our language work goes into improving the courses we have, rather than let's cover all the 7,000 languages we can cover. But obviously, we do prioritize and try to expand our language base as much as possible. Finnish was a course that was requested for a long time. So a lot of people were happy when it was introduced. So there is that part of history as well.
It's funny because there's this movement. I don't know if you've heard of this or not, but there's a movement to say that there's a movement of like conspiracy theorists that say Finland isn't even a country, and it's like it's like a construct. There's just Sweden and then Russia, and there's nothing in between it. But my wife and her family obviously beg to differ. But I think there's only something like 5 million on Earth native Finnish speakers. But that's cool. I'll have to tell her. I'm going to secretly start Duolingo Finnish, and then I'll start understanding what they're saying behind my back at family dinner.
That would be great.
You should. Well, actually, I had an inside baseball question, because I was just thinking about it. Like, obviously, with you either get demand from the user group saying like, I'd love to learn this language, or maybe it's a strategic decision to say that we need to add this language to get a new audience or new user base. But like, when the decision is made that you guys are going to add a new language, like how long does it actually take from when that decision is made until the resource allocation leads to actually putting that onto the app and online? Like, what ballpark wise, but like what type of resource commitment does that take you guys?
It really is a wide range, mainly because it really depends on the language and how fast we can move. And the reason I say that is, for example, if it's a Latin-based language, you might not need a lot of custom product work to teach an alphabet, because most of the time, if it's like, let's say, English to a Latin alphabet-based language, we can use the challenge types we have. We just need to build the right content into kind of the Duolingo experience. But for example, when we wanted to launch Arabic, when we launched out Japanese, you need to teach the alphabet properly. So that requires probably much more product work for us to do well. So those type of like, depending on, I guess, if we have kind of the infrastructure and the right challenge types to add that language, it tends to go faster. Versus if it kind of doesn't match existing language infrastructure we built, it's going to require more time. It could go anywhere from, and this is a wide range, we probably had languages that started being worked on and launched 24 months after. This is on the higher end of the spectrum, to ones that launched in 3 to 6 months, because maybe it was easier and we had a full team working on it, and it launched. But it's generally that type of time frame we're talking about. But yeah, so it really differs. And it's also another variable here is if we are, for example, if we have a tight deadline, because let's say we have a launch event that's tied to launching a course, it's maybe a celebration in the country that this course is going to be important in, then maybe timelines get faster, because it's like, all right, there's a deadline. we put more resources to get through it, versus if there's no hard deadline, it might take longer. So all of those things happen as well.
Gotcha. Well, we did want to ask you, how many languages do you speak, and has Duolingo helped you learn any new languages?
So I comfortably speak Turkish and English, and on Duolingo, I think I've learned survival Spanish and brushed up a little bit on French. Today, I'm trying to be better in Spanish. So a lot of my Duolingo work is, I have a 930-day streak now, and I'm continuing on Spanish.
I think I'm at 716. So you've got
Nice.
some days on me.
Yeah, streak competition is one of those things where unless I mess up, I can always be ahead. But that's I guess part of the game.
Yeah.
I have another thing I wanted to ask you, but it just came to mind when you said like celebrations in countries and deadlines like that. Do you see a spike during, like, for example, an Olympic competition where maybe athletes are all sort of learning at once, or up do you have enough resolution on your data to see that kind of thing?
We certainly have the resolution. Generally, we see trends that are the other way around for a lot of events. For example, during the World Cup, people are distracted by what, if you look at a country, let's take Argentina. We saw on the day where Argentina is playing the final, you kind of see a decline because the majority of the country is watching the World Cup, and they are probably less likely to keep their streak, or like kind of our normal traffic doesn't hold up as much. So big major events where a majority of a population is involved with, Christmas, etc. So those type of holidays, our traffic tends to like dip down. However, we have other moments of the year where it does the opposite. So New Year's is our biggest growth period in almost every country. Obviously, also the concept of a new year is different by country, but generally in kind of the North Hemisphere and the Western world, it's around January 1st or January. It's a big growth period. Another one is back to school, so around August. It's both students obviously coming back, but also I think summer vacation vibe dies off, so people want to pick back up their normal routines and habits. So that's another growth period we see. Yeah, I would say those are the most obvious ones. I think depending on the holiday, I think a lot of holidays in general, since kind of people break their routines, tend to give us traffic dips rather than increases.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, in the quantified world, you just must have those trends sort of at your fingertips, right?
Yeah, we measure all of these, and sometimes it's taken us a while to explain them even. Like, for example, for years, we always, in January is an amazing growth period, but then mid-February, we have a dip, and we kind of never exactly figured it out. But if you look at the exact day that the dip is being caused by, turns out it's Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is always a dip day for us. It makes sense, but it took us a while to figure it out.
Wow. Tell the card companies. Anyway, I wanted to, and thanks for spending the better part of a half hour with us. It's been really enlightening and even inspiring. You mentioned sort of at the outset that Duolingo is not done necessarily with language. You also launched Math Duolingo on iOS this past October, and you're talking about learning teaching other concepts through the platform. Could you give us a sneak peek of that, sort of like what's next for Duolingo, if you can, with some of these rollouts coming up?
Sure. So right now, the subjects we teach, so language, obviously, kind of our biggest product. There's math. And then there's literacy. So reading and writing. The one potential other subject, and I say potential because it might or might not happen, but one where we are thinking about is also music. The idea for us to do these generally these subjects is apply kind of what we've learned on Duolingo to different subjects. So it's very gamified. Content is always free, and it's all the gamification mechanics that exist on Duolingo are going to make their way to our apps for different audiences and different subjects. So that's kind of what we are thinking of doing. In the future, we might also do more kind of bundled products where you can imagine a world where your streak in one app is your Duolingo streak that applies to others. We might build more holistic experiences. We're certainly not there yet. Right now, what we're really focused on is just building apps that really teach a subject well and it's fun to use. And the latest one was math. So we're investing a lot in figuring out how we can do math. And the reason we did math as well, literacy and math both, is they really fit well into why also we did language, because learning English, for example, in a developing country really uplifts your earning potential. Literacy the same way, actually learning math the same way. So if we are able to educate people better on these subjects, it really uplifts their earning potential and life outcome, hopefully. So it makes a positive change in the world. So that was also kind of the reason behind why these three subjects first.
Yeah, and if you guys end up doing music, Mike's going to be putting your kids through college because he's going to be a super user of that one too. I could just feel it.
I was gonna say if one of those features on that app is to teach me how to like talk and play guitar at the same time, I will subscribe right away. I've been playing guitar and bass since I was like 14 years old, and I have never figured out how to. I can't sing one, so that's fine that I don't sing, but I cannot talk or sing and play at the same time. I don't know, my brain is just not wired that way, but there's got to be a way for me to figure it out. So we'll see.
All right. Well, keep an eye. It might happen.
Okay, Cem Kansu, thank you so much for joining us from Duolingo. It was awesome, and I think our listeners will definitely get a lot of the discussion we had. And thanks for sharing your time with us today.
Thanks, guys. It was great to chat about all of these with you.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Hello, Steve. Comment ça va?
That is so French Canadian, right? Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
That's
what's
my children are French Canadian. I learned from them, so I'm assuming that's what I speak.
You know, it's a really cute thing to watch your daughters too, because I remember when Zoe was really young and just learning to speak. And I mean, I think I spoke French when I was her age, but she legitimately had a French Canadian accent.
Oh yeah.
You know, from really young, and I guess it's just really interesting to see that, right?
It's such a wild ride, because honestly, if you would ask me like 15, 20 years ago, I would not have thought that I'd have kids that speak French.
Yeah.
And, that probably would have like scared me because I didn't speak French.
Yeah.
But then see them, speak French, and then learning French with them. But then the funny parts are when they learn how to speak English, and then you watch them try to navigate a language that I'm most comfortable with. And it's really interesting to see it that way, right? Because we found that, when Zoe was French was her first language, and then it took a little while. And I know that for sure, there was some anxiety in the family, in my family around like, is she ever going to learn English? Is it just French? Like, what if we can't communicate with her? And then like, honestly, one day with her, it just clicked. And all of a sudden it's like, I speak English now and French, and she can kind of switch off between the two so seamlessly. I wish I would get to that level of proficiency, and who knows, maybe one day I will, but it's wild. And then, my youngest, Sophia, just started speaking English like way earlier than Zoe ever did, right? And I'm assuming it's because she picked up on everything that her sister was saying or what we've been saying. But it was honestly like all of a sudden it's like, whoa, like you speak English now too. And so it's quite the while. It's been quite the ride for sure. But I will say that Duolingo has been a big part of my journey. It's I do like to try to keep my streak going every day. And so it's like the gamification of the app, I think, genuinely works. And I think, he's talking about going into different verticals with math. Math is something that I probably should take to kind of up my skills here and there. Just it wasn't a subject of mine that I had a lot of success with. But yeah, the gamification model. Do you do anything like this, Steve? Like, I know that you're not a Duolingo user, but you are going to now, so that you can get some finish under your belt and one up your in-laws at the next family dinner. But
yeah, I mean, I was always a good language learner, generally. I remember going when I was 12 to Holland and spending a few months there. That's where my mom's family's from, and I picked it up really quickly. But I think the fertile mind of youth is something to be said for, and I think that really is where your kids are coming from too, right? They're sponges at that age. But like, I'm always really interested in languages. I think it's interesting that they have Klingon and Finn on Duolingo, because I always thought that was the same language. But
we'll find out if Tanya listens to this.
We will definitely find out. I tell her all the time that I think Finn sounds like Klingon, but I'm prepared to be wrong about that. No, but definitely going to start some clandestine Duolingo Fin courses now that I know it's on the app, and we'll see if I can best them at the next dinner.
Yeah, no, I look forward to seeing your progress, because I think even before we had Jem on today, the story you shared about how, Finnish wasn't on Rosetta Stone. We even looked on my Duolingo app because I think you were convinced that it wasn't there either.
Yeah,
it is there. We didn't ask when they added it. I'm not sure if you would have known that anyway, but yeah, it's there. More than 40 languages. I wanted to ask him, can you give us a sneak peek at what languages you're dropping this year? But I felt as though, it's probably he's not gonna give us that info, but I'm sure
he's gone now, so it's too late.
It's too late. We missed our chance. But there's 7,000 languages, he said, in the world, and they have over 40. So I think there's a lot of potential there to grow. I don't think they're going to capture every language, but I'm sure they'll.
I think they're doubling up on a couple here. I don't know if there's 77,000. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I'm going to take his word over yours. Let's just say
I mean, here's me just making stuff up.
Yeah, you know what?
What about the VP of product at Duolingo? He might know.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Anyway, save me from myself. Thanks everyone for joining and tuning into Gem today, and I'm sure it was as fascinating as we found it.
Semaine prochaine.
Au revoir.
The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.